Hello, first grade friends. How are you? Welcome to reading session number 14. I need to tell you, I am so impressed with your work. As readers finding lessons, maybe you don't keep them in your pocket. Maybe you do. I keep my fortune there. But you know what? Here's what you're doing. You kept those lessons and you held them in your heart because we figured out that stories teach us, right? We learn from our books. You have grown from readers that were learning how to read to becoming readers that learn. Now you read to learn. So incredibly awesome. And today I want to teach you something else that readers do. I want to teach you that readers compare and contrast. They compare and contrast books and they think, what's the same? What's different? First, I'm going to show you an easy way to compare and contrast. I'm going to use some shoes. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about how to compare and contrast, looking at the ways that things are the same and different. So we're going to start with something simple like these shoes. Are you noticing right away something that is the same? I always like to start with those things that are in likeness. So I'm noticing, I know, you said it right, they're both red. They're both red, they're both shoes. You wear them. Those are some things they have in common. Now we can start talking about differences, and that's the contrast. Comparing is likeness, and contrast means ways that they're different. So obviously, these shoes are much bigger than this shoe. If I were to compare and contrast their size, yeah, they're much different. These look like adult shoes, right? Are you seeing some dirt on them? Me too. So these are a little bit dirty. It looks like they've been out, possibly mowing the lawn, which they were. They were Connor's shoes. And he let me keep them just so I could use them in an example like this. And these were Lindsay's from a Halloween costume. Yeah, she dressed up as Dorothy, right? Tap 3 times. Oh, so good. So these are sparkly, right? Did some people say that? They're sparkly, they're little, right? Lindsay wore these when she was like 4. So they're tiny. They look clean though, because she only wore them a few times. Another thing that I'm noticing that's different is the way that you tie them up, right? There's laces on these tennis shoes, and then these have little buckles and straps. Cool. So this is how we compare and contrast. We talk about some similar things in ways that they are alike and ways that they're different, and we compare them. And we're going to do the same thing with some books, because that's what readers do. They compare and contrast their books. What ways are these books alike, and in which ways are these books different? That's what readers do. Come join me. So we took a good look at shoes, right? We did compare and contrast. We looked at things that were the same about those shoes and things that were different. And now I want to show you how readers do it with books. So I'm going to add to our anchor chart. Here's what we've done. Talking about lessons was a huge part of learning more from our books. So talking about those lessons, because that's the whole point of this anchor chart, is readers learn lessons. That heart and theme of the story, those are the kinds of things that you're going to continue to do the rest of your life. In every book you read, you're going to wonder, what is the heart and the theme of the story? What lesson did I learn? Sometimes you might think about the trouble that happened in the story and how it got fixed, right? Because when the problem gets solved, that can help you also figure out the lesson in the story. What did the character realize or learn? Many times characters go through a change or something else happens in the story where other characters change. Maybe it's not the main character. Those changes can really help us determine what lesson is there to be learned from this book. And sometimes when we start reading books, we can think, I wonder if this is one of those books that teaches you, right, predicting the lesson right from the start. And today we're going to add to our anchor chart, compare and contrast books, right? Thinking, what's the same, what's different? So I'm adding this to the anchor chart today, and watch me show you how I compare and contrast. First of all, I would find some books. So you might have a book stack like this, and you might pull a couple out. I happen to have some Nate the Greats and some Cam Jansen here, because these were from our mysteries box. So I know they're in the same genre, which is a bonus. And I'm gonna pick a couple of them to think about. Cam Jansen and Nate the Great. Guess what? They both are detectives. I'm thinking right away, what's the same? They're both detectives. They both love to solve mysteries. Cam Jansen is a girl. Nate the Great is a boy. Maybe that's something different. He's pretty goofy, don't you think? And he's always on the lookout for clues. But Cam Jansen has kind of a little gift where she has like a camera. Remember, Cam is short for like camera mind. So like she has this imagery in her head of photographs, almost takes a picture in her head of what she saw for clues. So they go about their business a little differently, and that's how I contrast the differences, okay? Here's another example. When we read Chester's Way, Lily was in it. So what's the same? Lily's in both of these books, in Chester's Way and Lily's Plastic Purse. This book, Chester and Wilson, I think, are maybe in it in part of it when they're in the classroom, but then mostly we find out this whole book is about the relationship with Chester and Wilson and how they do all the same things and they learn to tie their shoes, and Lily teaches them some stuff. So that's the difference, right? In this book, it's all about Lily at school and her plastic purse that gets her into a little bit of trouble. There's her teacher, Mr. Slinger is in this book. He's not in this one. So that's how I compare and contrast. They're both about those mice though, right? Speaking of, I could really do a close look at these two books, Wemberly Worried and Chrysanthemum. So watch me compare and contrast. Things that are the same. They're both those mice, they're mouse characters, right? They're both mice. They both have a little bit of trouble at school. They both have like an awesome mom and dad that were so supportive of them when they needed help. And they had an incredible teacher in each story. Different teachers, but a teacher helped them out. In Wemberly Worried, she worries all the time about everything. She's got that cool birthmark around her eye. That's something that's different. She has a grandma in this story, remember? And grandma's always like, go with the flow, stuff like that. Those are some things that are different from these books. In Chrysanthemum, the things that are different is that she's kind of concerned about her name, right? She's unsure about it, and then she gets made fun of. It was pretty terrible. And she plays Parcheesi, right? And her dad makes those delicious snacks. Those are some of the ways that these books are different. Compare and contrast means looking at the ways books are the same and the way that books are different. Join me today at the table where we take a closer look at some books that we've read, and we're going to do a Venn diagram, comparing and contrasting those two ways. A Venn diagram is one of the best ways to show compare and contrast. So in Readers Learn Lessons, we've talked about these things on our anchor chart. Thinking about how did the trouble get fixed? What did the character realize or learn? Predicting the lesson right from the start. I wonder if this is one of those stories that teaches you. And today's focus is compare and contrast books, right? Compare and contrast books. What's the same? What's different? And we did that with some shoes, and we did that with some books, and I'm going to talk about that. So this was the shoes, and I'm showing you it on a Venn diagram. You guys should be familiar with Venn diagrams. Do you remember the huge chart we have hanging in the hallway? We've compared like I like red apples, or I like green apples, or I like both. We compared sharks and whales, ways that they're the same and ways that they're different. We compared like holidays in Mexico and holidays in the United States. So that's the great thing about a Venn diagram, is the ability to compare and contrast. So with Connor's Nikes and Dorothy's slippers, we noticed laces, they were dirty. These are Connor's. Oh, actually, let me talk about the same first. They're red. Oh, they both have soles on the bottom. They're both shoes. They're both kind of fun, maybe, because they're red. But Connor's shoes had laces. They were dirty. They had that Nike swirl on his shoe as a design. His are 10.5 or 10.5 is the size. Adult shoe, right? And it has a white sole, which is the bottom part of it. Dorothy's slippers were sparkly. They had a buckle. They had a strap. They had a heel. They were clean. They were size 9.5 child's shoes. They had like a black sole and they were shiny. So that's how we compare and contrast something like shoes. And today we're working on doing it with books. So I wrote up this one comparing Chrysanthemum and Wemberley. So you can see another example of how we're going to use the Venn diagram as a tool to organize our thinking. The center part are things that were the same. Chrysanthemum and Wemberley are both some of Kevin Henkes's mice. He did that whole collection of mice stories. And they both had trouble at school, and they had a wise teacher that helped them, right? And they both have an awesome mom and dad at home. Chrysanthemum is unsure about her long name, right? And she got made fun of, and she plays Parcheesi, and there's probably more things I could think about Chrysanthemum, like all of her outfits, right? Wemberley worries about everything. She's got that birthmark. She has a stuffed animal named Petal. She has a grandma that was really cool. Go with the flow. This is how I compared those books. Sweet. So one of the things you can think about in those books is the lessons, because sometimes the lessons might be the same. For instance, if I were to compare Henry and Mudge and Mr. Putter, I might think that they both love their pets, right? So that's kind of was the heart of the story, of like kind of love your pet. And, Mr. Putter loves his tabby cat, and tabby cat loves him. Remember how she's like, she loves Mr. Putter? And same with Henry and Mudge. Like Mudge even loves Henry's bed. That's how these books are the same, is their pets, and that whole theme of their stories about loving pets. But then they're way different. Mr. Putter is old and naps a lot. Henry is full of energy, and he goes camping and on adventures with his dog. So I could talk about all the ways that they're different. Even if I wanted to use Henry and Mudge again, I could use these two stories and compare them. And you might think, Mr. Bohr, what's the same in those? Do you remember when Mudge got lost? And do you remember when Walter got lost? Right? The problem in both of these stories was similar. But then there's lots of things that are different. There's not really pets in Iris and Walter. Henry spends a lot of time searching, whereas Walter didn't even know he was lost. So we could talk about the ways that they're different. Today, I'm going to review a couple other of our favorite books. I'm using books that are familiar because your invitation is going to be find two books at home that maybe have that same lesson. So for instance, I talked about this. I even predicted from the beginning that Mouse and Mole might have a friendship similar to Frog and Toad. And my prediction ended up being true. They do a lot of things together. So the word together is going to describe my Mouse and Mole and all kinds of things. And I'm going to do a Venn diagram with these two books. But before I even get started, I'm going to review a few things. So I know the friendship part is the same. In this particular story of Frog and Toad are friends, it's springtime. And Toad is like trying to look at the calendar and figure out, is it spring yet? And Phew, and Frog helps him realize it is. And then one day, Frog was not feeling well, and Toad tries to entertain him. Toad had a lost button, and Frog helped out. Let's see, what other ones are in here? The letter. Remember, Toad was like wishing for a letter, and Frog ends up writing him one, but it takes forever with snail mail, okay? That's some of the events that happen in here. In my Mouse and Mole story, remember, they didn't start off right away as friends. They were kind of like, they lived in the same tree. And the problem was that, Mouse kept sweeping down into Mole's space. But then they figured out the problem together, right? And they started learning that all these things could happen for them. They live in very different spaces, and they had to accommodate to each other, right? And then, I loved the happy ending, didn't you? With the canoe paddle. It was a pair of paddles so that they could really get around instead of going in circles. They really worked together. So today I'm going to complete a Venn diagram, because this is what readers do. Readers compare and contrast books. This page is a helper. Let me show you. In this section, but in this section. So that's what I'm going to be thinking. This part happened in this book, but this happened in this book. In this book, blank, blank, blank. But in this book, the difference between Frog and Toad and Mouse and Mole is, what's the same about these two is, unlike Frog, in this book, Mole doesn't like to, or first we learned this, but now we're learning this. That's how readers compare and contrast books. These are all great examples. And we're going to use a Venn diagram to organize our thinking today. So here we go. I've got a blank Venn diagram. So the very first thing I need to do is talk about the two things I'm comparing and contrasting. So I've got Frog and Toad, and then over here, I've got Mouse and Mole. Now, the titles were longer because this is Upstairs Mouse, Downstairs Mole, and this is Frog and Toad Are Friends. But I'm keeping it very simple in my kind of way that I'm talking about these. What do I want to call these? In my top boxes, as distinguishing between which two books am I comparing. I'm just kind of keeping it simple in the title. First, I think about what's the same. They're friends, right? They do a lot of working together. They help each other. They're kind, right? So true. Now, if I think about Frog and Toad, some of the things that are different is that they're over here. I could even be this silly. Oopsie. They're amphibians. I almost wrote reptiles, but they are not. Reptiles have scales. They're amphibians, and over here I could say Mouse and Mole they're rodents, or also part of the mammal family, right? Isn't that funny? That's way different, right? But also where they live. Like over here, they live in a tree. It seemed like Frog and Toad, and in the same tree. I'm actually going to put the same tree. And over here, Frog and Toad live in like their own houses. They each have their own house, and they go over to visit each other, right? Even able to send a letter. So like there's snail mail in this one. Over here, they go canoeing. That doesn't happen. What else? I see a mailbox on the cover when I'm looking at this one, thinking that might be something. They both might get snail mail. What else? In Frog and Toad, there was a lost button. Frog is sick. In Mouse and Mole, they send invitations, right, to dinner. And they give gifts to each other. Remember, they gave gifts like candles and sunglasses. Even the canoe paddle, a paddle was a gift. So there's a lot of gift giving here. In Frog and Toad, sending letters, right? They realize how important it is to get letters from each other, just to make someone else feel good. This is a way to compare and contrast because readers will take a good look at their books and compare and contrast. Today, we practice comparing and contrasting by using a Venn diagram to organize our thoughts in ways to think about the books, what they share in likeness goes in the overlapping part of the circles. And then each book, the way that they're different, goes in the outer part of each circle. Nice. What a great way to organize our thinking, because readers, we hold those lessons dear in our heart that we learn from our favorite books, and we compare and contrast and think about, oh yeah, these books had the same theme, but there was lots of things that were also different in each story. Best wishes working on compare and contrast. Here we are back at the anchor chart. In our Readers Learn lessons, today our focus was on compare and contrast books. Think about ways that they are the same and ways that they are different. Your invitation is to complete a Venn diagram, because a Venn diagram is a great way to organize your thinking to show ways that they're the same in the overlap and then ways that they're different in the outer part of the circles. So cool. So today, have a great time comparing and contrasting books and using a Venn diagram.